Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof for the, goodness me, 22nd of September 2025. We have lots to go through, but it shouldn't be as long as the last couple of days. Apologies for the long ones recently. There's been so much to discuss. Now, first of all, we go to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply. And you can find them linked in the description below. We have a fairly typical day of pretty high personnel losses, almost 1,960 lost, very low tank and troop carrying AFV losses, one in each, one single multiple launch rocket system. Then we have 47 artillery systems, so creeping up towards almost double the daily average there. So really heavy losses in artillery, and back up to heavy losses in vehicles and fuel tanks, 118 over the 100 threshold. What is interesting about today is we have 3 helicopters added to the list, which means the General Staff is happy enough that they have evidence for the strikes that took place not last night, 2 nights ago, when the Primary group showed 3 helicopters being, well, indicated that 3 were probably struck. 1 satellite image of a destroyed helicopter, and I said that 2 drones looked like they hit close to, but we couldn't definitely say they hit the helicopter, but there would have been shrapnel causing quite a lot of damage, and 1 definitely looked like it was going straight into the helicopter before it cut out. Okay, but you need extra information there, and I presume the Ukrainians have got extra information. Well, we are going to see in a little while that there is a video clip that's out as well today. So not only that, but Primary have released another video today of further interesting equipment destruction, including possibly another helicopter and 2 aeroplanes. So more on that in a minute. Let's go to personnel issues. Now, Igor Sushko, take what he says sometimes with a pinch of salt. Well, I've reported recently that the Center for Countering Disinformation have claimed that the Russians are recruiting 37,900 people over the last quarter 2, and it was kind of similar in quarter 1. They are well below where they need to be to replace their troops that they are losing, and the Ukrainians are struggling as well to recruit too, although their recruitment's gone up, but it's still half of what they need. So both sides are in this similar situation, but I think the Russians, if those figures are to be believed, are in real trouble. And then Sushko here says, Russia is forming a strategic reserve of new soldiers of an unknown size, according to ISW's Russian insider source. So nearly 300,000 new contract soldiers recruited this year so far. Now, if that's true, then that is over 30,000 a month. So there is a very big difference here. Now, somebody's not correct. Either the ISW's Russian insider source is not correct, or Countering Russian Disinformation, the organization in Ukraine, is not correct. So the claim here is nearly 300,000 new contract soldiers recruited this year so far. Invasion of NATO members on the eastern flank is coming unless Europe wakes up. Now, this then fits more in line with what Andrew Perpetua has been saying and others, that there is a big amassing of troops that is going to attack in the east. I don't know, right? I'm just reporting to you what other people are saying, and goodness me. So the evidence of the front line fits in line with both of these theories, because they are definitely not throwing as many troops at the frontline positions as they would otherwise want to. For either they don't have the troops, or they're stockpiling them elsewhere, because they've moved troops in Sumy and Kherson to feed into Pokrovsk, because Pokrovsk is looking a bit disastrous. Now, you would think if they were recruiting that many troops, then they would be putting them into places like Pokrovsk, but they don't seem to be doing that. But it doesn't mean that they aren't recruiting them, because they could be stockpiling them at the back. So the data seems to be able to confirm both theses at the moment, and that's a little bit frustrating. A Russian insider source that has consistently provided accurate reports about changes in the Russian military command stated on September the 21st, says the Institute for the Study of War, that roughly 292,000 people signed contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense between the start of 2025 and September the 15th, an average of approximately 7,900 recruits a week, or 31,600 per month. The insider source stated that some of these recruits are joining the strategic reserve that Russia has been forming since early July 2025. The source did not specify how many recruits are going to the strategic reserve as opposed to the frontline in Ukraine. Now, I would assume that satellite imagery would be sought after at the moment to kind of look into this and confirm this, because I'm fairly sure if you've got 300,000 odd people suddenly operating in training bases around Russia, you would see some kind of evidence of that. But I don't know. I mean, this is pretty scary if it is true. Pinch of salt. I mean, it's not. I said pinch of salt with Igor Sushko. He's actually quoting for the RSW, which is a really decent source. So, pinch of salt though, because it's dependent on one Russian source, but they claim that source has otherwise been accurate. So, could be worrying for the Ukrainians. Now, 810th Marines are clashing in the tree lines by the reservoir up in Sumy. Here we're hearing pushing and pulling in brutal close combat. In Oleksivka, Russia's 30th Regiment keeps getting thrown in headfirst, bleeding with little to show for it. At Unikivka, several Russian battalions are stretched to their limit. The idea is that they're in trouble up here. And I'm talking to you in this granular detail that I'd otherwise reserve for my frontline videos, because it kind of feeds into this. Well, if they had that many troops, they'd be throwing them into places like this, surely. So what is going on? And isn't it interesting that they're holding them all back? They would rather kind of lose Sumy, maybe, than commit these extra troops, possibly because those extra troops are going to be better utilized in a massive onslaught somewhere, I don't know, in the east, for example. Could be worrying. Now, I often talk to you about how the figures in the Ukrainian General Staff lists are broadly accurate in terms of the equipment lost. I'm fairly confident that what they claim now is pretty accurate. I think at the beginning of the war, they got aircraft and helicopters wrong. So I think that these numbers are possibly overinflated, but it's very difficult for them to rejig them now. I think that as the war has gone on, they've been asking for better evidence for the claims that come from each individual unit. And I think the systems are now in place 4 years down the line. I think it's probably running like clockwork now. And so I have confidence that what they claim here is broadly going to be accurate, but I'm not so interested in the exact numbers. I'm interested in the trends that we see and what they might tell us. But I have said to you many, many times that personnel numbers are going to be the least accurate in terms of they are the most difficult to definitely evidence. Like if a tank gets blown up, you see a tank getting blown up, and there you go. That's a tank. It's blown up. I can see it in the field. It's no longer moving. It's missing 2 tracks and the turret's fallen off, right? That, we're going to add that to the list, and there's video evidence. But for personnel, those numbers, yeah, okay, you will get drones that take out individual people and then take them out and you can see them dead on the field, right? Okay. Fair enough, that's decent evidence that that person has been killed or incapacitated. But when you have a building that's struck, you're not sure exactly how many people are in there, how many people are dead, how many people are injured. When an infantry fighting vehicle full of people is struck, how many people are inside the vehicle? How many, what do they use like an average? Are we going to average it over, we just assume that any vehicle has this given number of people in, and that's an educated guess at how many people are going to be injured or killed when a vehicle gets completely blown up. A dugout, how many people do you know that are inside there? So this number, I think, is going to be largely a guesstimate, but with some evidence. Like we've seen 20 people go into this building off and on. We've been using reconnaissance drones to really keep a close eye on the building, and we think there's 20 people in there. We've sent a guided glide bomb into that building, so we're going to assume that 10 people have been killed or injured. An example of this would be here, right? So that was my preamble to this. So the claim is a MiG-29 with a GBU-62, so guided glide bomb, has eliminated 10 Russian soldiers in eastern Ukraine, according to Sonyashnik. The question is, well, okay, let's look at this. We've got a building, and I'm assuming there are Russians in there, and this building gets hit with 2 bombs. How do we know 10 people have been eliminated? This is a significant strike. You've got a large strike there, and you have another strike over here on the left-hand side. How do you conclude that 10 people there have been taken out? And then, the question is, well, actually, is what Sonyashnik is claiming here, the elimination of 10 soldiers, is that what goes to the general staff? So this, I think, could be an example of how there are guesstimates taking place, because there's absolutely no way, unless you've got a Russian source on the ground telling you what has happened, there's no way you're going to know who was killed and who was injured in a strike like that. So that's kind of my point I've been making throughout the war. So I would always take these personnel figures, the exact numbers, with a pinch of salt. Now, in terms of equipment, here is a pretty fascinating video of Russian troops filming a Ukrainian drone strike on their own supply convoy. What I want to play you, I mean, basically, you've got someone that's out of the vehicle there, then down by the side, watching the vehicle get hit at the front there by a drone, and then it gets hit at the back of the drone as well. And you see it on fire here, and this is the one where it's on fire and it gets hit again. Right, what I want to do is play you the sound from here, because the sound is, I think, something that will haunt soldiers for many years to come.
Ну нихуёво загорелось. Да, горит прям. Да.
That sound there, that sounds like multiple drones in the air. This guy's hiding to the side, knowing, I'm sure, that the amount of videos you see where they'll go for the man instead of the vehicle if the vehicle's already taken out. So this guy's like hiding with a camera with his phone up in the undergrowth next to the vehicle, thinking, well, is this drone going to hit me? If I stay still, if I pretend to be dead, does this save my life? And then it explodes there. I'm going to turn the sound off because I get in trouble for that. And then it explodes at the back there. But, that sound is horrific. Anyway, there's a bunch of equipment getting destroyed. Russian troops filmed the Ukrainian drone strike on their own supply convoy. Then you have this from a train in Leningrad region. The tank cars are still there. Earlier, it was reported that sabotage took place on the railway tracks, and all of these fuel carriages we saw in a previous video. I think it's the same fuel carriages that I reported previously, still sat there on the side of the railway. Quite incredible, just the success of some sabotage, I guess. There you go. Right, what else do we have? Russian forces are trying to infiltrate Kupiansk disguised as civilians. This should have been earlier in my personnel bit, sorry. Are trying to infiltrate Kupiansk disguised as civilians while continuing daily strikes with guided glide bombs and artillery. The city is 90% destroyed, with only 1,700 residents remaining. Wow, still that many. Yet Russia still can't capture this logistics center. So Zelensky keeps talking about how they're clearing Russians out of Kupiansk. I don't know the situation in reality there. The Russians are really trying hard to take it from the northwest, sorry. Well, both. Kupiansk has been under an awful lot of pressure. Okay, here we have, what do we have? For the first time ever, Ukraine's HUR primary, so the Primary group has just consistently produced amazing footage of all sorts of equipment getting blown up predominantly in Crimea. These guys are just amazing. The unit destroyed here 2 Russian B-12 Chaika anti-submarine amphibious craft during it. So these are old seaplanes that are, I think, still used to try and hunt out Ukrainian boats in the Crimean region. So these are 2 of them have been struck. These rare aircraft carry expensive sonar and tracking systems, and a Mi-8 helicopter apparently was also hit in the same operation. And these guys, I think, really do the business in their videos, and we then see results of their work thereafter. Here, what's interesting at the beginning of this, you can see one of the drones above this drone that you're viewing from, suggesting that these are big old drones here, carrying quite a punch. I'm not sure what type of drone that is. But obviously, there are 2 drones going towards the targets here, and these pack a punch, and they are doing a lot of damage to Russian equipment on the Crimean Peninsula. Here we have a helicopter. This is a Mi-8 that was hit, and then we have these 2 seaplanes that are that are parked up here on the land. I presume they're amphibious, so they can take off from the land as well. One supposedly being hit there and another being hit here. You can assume that that's the end of those planes. I mean, those drones are, even if the warhead doesn't detonate there, the damage that drone's going to do slamming inside that plane is going to render it inoperable. There's no doubt about that in my mind. So Primari are doing the business. So in Crimea, Ukraine struck 2 Russian B-12 Chaika amphibious aircraft for the first time in the war and 1 Mi-8 helicopter with drones. Russia had 9 operational B-12 aircraft used for marine patrol, but likely fewer than 7 now. Russia has used their last remaining Chaika aircraft during the war to do patrol missions around Crimea, looking for threats, including Ukrainian naval kamikaze drones, and that's the size of that plane. It's a sizable plane, right? Can take off from the ground as well, evidently, and does marine reconnaissance activity. 2 drones taking out 2 of those planes, and you can imagine that if those drones are getting through with the degradation of the air. See, this is what I think is happening. So the Ukrainians clearly, with the Primari group and others, have been degrading the Russian air defences in Crimea to the point where I think that they can almost freely go around Crimea just picking off targets now. We've had 2 nights in a row, one where 3 helicopters and a Nebo radar. That's potentially $100 million worth of Nebo radar and $15 million of each of these planes. So, $45 million of helicopters, sorry. That's last night. Tonight, we had, 2 nights ago, then last night we had 1 helicopter and 2 planes with very expensive equipment on board. What's it going to be tomorrow night? They appear to be anything that's left over, send up more drones tomorrow and see you later, planes and helicopters. And that renders Crimea, an untenable place for the Russians to hold. We now see evidence of the aftermath of the strikes from probably 2 nights ago. So the aftermath of the recent Ukrainian drone strike on Russian Mi-8 helicopters in Crimea, published by Russian source with such description, quote, "They'll hit Crimea again, minus the helicopters and a few other things." So you've got helicopters in the plural here. I can't write about them. There's no air defense and the radar is useless. There you go. This is going to be arguably a purple patch for the Ukrainians, I think, at the moment. This is the kind of stuff that gets me quite excited for Ukraine. I think this is incredibly important. So here we have a helicopter that is no more. It uses helicopters in the plural, but you've got one behind it. You can imagine that's surely, if that's still there according to satellite imagery, then that's not going to be there in a couple of nights' time. Turns around, I don't know that we can see anything else, helicopters plural, but maybe something there. You see in there, I think that could be a helicopter, but I'm not 100% sure. So when they talk about helicopters being destroyed, that could be a destroyed helicopter there, and then another destroyed helicopter just obviously here under the nose. 3 helicopters. There was satellite imagery of 1 destroyed helicopter. I don't know if it is one of these or this one. But arguably, I mean, the Ukrainian General Staff have included 3 helicopters on today's list. Then there is a claim that in Kaluga Oblast, according to Igor Sushko, Ukrainian Special Forces destroyed a Russian S-400 air defense system radar and a launcher there. Feels like Ukraine is clearing a path for missile strikes against Moscow, as that's on the way to Moscow. That could be interesting. Now, Tim White was saying this morning that there are claims that 2. So if I find his claim. If I go to, in fact, let's renew my normal thread here, and we should find him at the top of it because he's always commenting. And then we'll go to him because I say that here it is. He does say up here. By the way, you may see this too, published by the same special operations team. However, it's not new. Ukraine already confirmed the strike of these 2 S-400 systems, as I reported on the 5th of September. So that is Kaluga. There's 16 days ago, 2 S-400 air defense systems in Kaluga. So that might not be true that they were taken out last night. So pinch of salt with that one particularly. Okay. Now we're going to look at the destruction of drones with interceptor drones. So here we have a Skywars unit of the 47th Magura Motorized Rifle Brigade shooting down enemy reconnaissance drones in Kursk and Sumy regions. So just in a couple of regions, 23 reconnaissance drones have been taken out in 2 weeks. That's about 12 a week. That's, 1.5 a night. All day. 9 Zala Lancets, 9 Zalas. So the Lancet being the like that one, the X-wing drone that packs a 4 kilogram, say, warhead. 5 Molnias, so that's a kamikaze drone. 2 Supercans and 2 Gerbers. So that's a mixture of kamikaze drones and reconnaissance drones. So the Euromaidan press report on this saying Russia has sharply reduced the use of reconnaissance drones after Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade destroyed 23 of them in just 2 weeks. So they're claiming this has had a tangible effect on the usage of reconnaissance drones in the area. Now, I don't know about that. That's the claim of the Euromaidan press. Rare Supercam SM-18s, Zala, Molnia and Gerber models are in the list of obliterated Russian targets here from Magura. So that could be really good news for reconnaissance up in that area. The Russians might be less able to commit to reconnaissance missions. Then we have this intercepted drones again being used against this time a Russian four-post drone. The four-post drone, I think is an Israeli drone originally, is one that carries, like the Orion, it carries well, it can do reconnaissance, long range like the Bayraktar TB2, long range reconnaissance, or it can carry weapons, and this apparently is carrying 2 carb guided glide bombs. These are carb 20, so I presume they're 20 kilogram bombs rather than being the huge ones. Obviously a drone of that size wouldn't be able to carry a massive 2,000 kilogram bomb like you see dropped by the jets, but nonetheless we have an interceptor drone taking out a 4-post drone, which is a pretty decent piece of kit, and that was carrying weapons for the Russians there. So that's what it looks like. You've got the 2 tail pots there. It's not very clear from this video, and that's what it looks like from another angle. Something like that. Okay. We also hear that this is happening in Nizhin, which I reported yesterday was being struck. This is in the Chernihiv region, or is it Sumy region? Russian drones have started dropping explosives directly onto the streets of Ukrainian cities. So that incident occurred a few days ago. But there seems to be no end to the war crimes that Russia's willing to commit, and they get caught on camera. Right, let's go to distant strikes. Last night there was a bit of an uptick in strikes. There's claims that, I don't know if I've got it on my list, surely I have, that the Ukrainians managed to hit a significant haul of Shahed drones, but actually maybe that's the end of August, beginning of September, so a good 20 days ago. But there are claims that an ammunition depot full of a whole bunch of drones was hit. Anyway, 141 drones last night, which is an uptick from the night before, 132 of which were shot down. That's a really good interception rate. 132 out of 141 is, better than, as upwards of 90%. So I don't know the exact number. Someone else can work that out, but that's pretty good. No missiles sent. Massive fires have broken out in Sumy after drone strikes. 3 drones hit warehouses there. Fire covered a large area and quickly spread through combustible structures. So Sumy, yet again, under a lot of pressure. And then Zaporizhia seemed to be one of the areas of a main focus for the Russians. Quote, not a single facility was related to military infrastructure, said the regional governor Ivan Fedorov, calling it a deliberate terror attack against a peaceful city and its residents. Just lots of civilian infrastructure, residential neighborhoods, shopping centers, 15 apartment buildings and 10 private houses, trying to make a major city of Ukraine untenable to live in, just like Kherson. Although most attack drones were stopped, it was aerial bombs launched at civilians, which caused the death and despair in Zaporizhia this morning. 3 people were killed and 2 injured. No fewer than 10 guided glide bombs hit the city, fell on the sleeping population there. They are doing to Zaporizhia what they have done to Kherson and other places like Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka. Zaporizhia is a major city, but it is close to the front lines, and it is really feeling the wrath of the Russians. As President Zelensky says, Russia heads to the UN General Assembly with more blood on its hands. It's the 4th annual meeting since Putin's launch of full invasion. Still not enough people had the guts to save a country and innocent lives from a tyrant. Zaporizhia again mourns. In Sumy, a security guard was injured and various villages and districts were hit with guided glide bombs again, long range and FPV drones. A college was hit, as were industrial facilities, houses and apartment blocks also suffered damage. So a lot of destruction. Double taps also being reported in a number of places. So where they strike a place, emergency workers then go and help out, and then they strike the place again to take out the emergency workers. So that's also been reported. In fact, here's a double tap video caught another tribute to emergency workers in Ukraine. This is the sort of terror they're exposed to daily. Huge attack drones, almost in touching distance overhead, diving for cover, not knowing if you'll live or die. Here, a colleague blown into a lake by a blast wave. And that apparently was a double tap, according to other sources. So, really horrible scenes in Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Rescue efforts continue after Russians struck apartment blocks and private homes, said Zelensky. At least 3 people are confirmed dead there, with many more injured. 15 high rises and 10 houses lie in ruins. The destruction is daily. There's a school that has been damaged. It's appalling stuff from the Russians yet again. Now, there's a United 24 article, why Russia's Shahed drones are now deadlier and harder than ever to stop. The development, we've been talking about this previously, I think it's largely down to sending more of them. The Russians are innovating, of course, but then the Ukrainians try and come up with countermeasures to the countermeasures that the Russians build in, and that is that cat and mouse game that they're playing. Why are they so difficult to stop? So they are intensifying the attack. So they're just launched sometimes, as many as almost 800 drones are sent in, and that's just very difficult. So they overwhelm air defenses, and they're harder to stop because there are more of them. As of the end of May 2025, Russia's production rate of Shaheds and Garans are approximately 2,700 units a month, according to a statement of the press service of Ukraine's military intelligence directorate. 2,700 a month. Absolutely incredible. Almost 100 a day there. The publication further noted that the production rates of Shahed-type drones indicate a 5-fold increase compared to the summer of 2024. Back then, a source with Ukraine's intelligence stated that the production was around 500 a month. Then they're using lots of decoy drones built from plywood, foam and basic electronics that mimic Shaheds but cost a fraction to produce. Many are unarmed but some carry small warheads or reconnaissance gear. Their purpose is to overwhelm Ukraine's air defense and burn through precious ammunition. Deadlier designs. Upgraded Shaheds have now 90-kilogram warheads. The explosive charge itself has increased from 28 to 62 kilograms, significantly boosting destructive powers. Jet engines for higher speeds make interception more difficult. Armoured engine compartments to resist machine gun fire. And fuel tanks that are relocated from the wings to the main body, making them less vulnerable. These changes have turned Shaheds into tougher, more resilient and deadlier weapons. And they're cutting costs, bringing them down from $200,000 a piece to $70,000 a piece. Centre for Strategic and International Studies reported in February 2025 that a Shahed drone costs around $35,000, but then in May it revised the assessment to $20,000 to $50,000. So there's this range of prices of costs for these drones, but if they can be as low as $20,000, but maybe as high as $50,000 to $70,000, then that is a fraction of what it was when they were $200,000 a piece. So this is a problem for the Ukrainians. They are cheaper, they're building more of them, they're deadlier, they're harder to shoot down. Then they take on these new tactics, flying very high, flying very low, terminal dives are very quick from very high, and so on and so forth. So they're out of range of a number of different weapons, and then the Ukrainians have to resort to more expensive weapons to shoot them down, etc., etc. Now, one weapon that is having some decent success is the UK-provided Raven air defense system. It's kind of a Frankensam made of a Supercat truck, and they've whacked on some surface-to-air ASRAAM missiles. No, they're not surface-to-air. They're used as surface-to-air, but they're actually air-to-air missiles. They have a lower range when you fire them up for the ground because they have to overcome gravity and get up to speed rather than releasing them from a plane. They're already up high and traveling very fast, so they have a much longer range fired from the air. These ones much shorter range, but having a pretty decent 70% plus interception rate with these Ravens. So that's good news there. There's video footage of them being used. Now, moving on to Ukrainian successes, although there was something here. Let's actually go to this one next because it refers to Russian drones. So Donald Tusk, through the Prime Minister of Poland through TVP, has said there's been no confirmed case of a drone with a warhead crashing on Polish territory. There has been no reason to believe that any of these findings could pose a threat. There has been no confirmed case of a drone crash that could explode. In addition, it's worth remembering that civilian drones are very common in Poland. In recent days, there have been already 2 cases of aircraft being found on the ground, and it turned out that these objects were not related to drone aggression. That said, there were 19 sent in, and they were either reconnaissance or decoys, and that is an incursion into NATO airspace, even if they didn't have warheads on board. Right. Kiev Independent reports that fire has erupted at an electrical substation in Russia's Krasnodar Krai region after reported drone attack there. Fires broke out at the electrical substation in the town of Staroderevyenkovskaya in southwest Russia amid a drone attack overnight. Indeed, there are claims that that substation was hit with 5 drones, and so significant damage was done there. That was recorded as well last night. By the way, also Ukrainian trains were hit last night. Here's views from inside a train with all the glass punched in, and destruction from a fairly new looking train there, so that'd be frustrating for the Ukrainians. Anyway, back to what the Ukrainians have done to the Russians. So a substation here in Krasnodar region. Occupied Horlivka in Donetsk this morning apparently has received a missile, as Ukrainians hitting occupied territories with a missile strike. We are hearing that right now active drones are in the airspace around Belbek Air Base in Crimea. Attack drones in the sky equipped with high explosives, say the Russians. So there's lots of warnings. This is just one of them, but there are plenty of warnings about Crimea being targeted yet again. And it was targeted yesterday. Ukrainian forces struck the Foros Sanatorium in Crimea, known as the FSB Dacha, so where even Putin vacations. So these are these holiday homes. You say, why strike a holiday home? Surely that's just waging war on civilians. Well, no, these are often used by Russian well, as you can hear here, Putin himself, but Russian officers. They've struck dachas like this before, both in Crimea and then up the coast, going towards Skadovsk in the Kherson region, number of places there, then around Henichesk at the northeastern point of Crimea, and across to Berdyansk as well. So some of these coastal areas that have famously had, decent tourism in the past, now you have hotels that aren't really being used as much, and they get co-opted by the military. And this is what's happened supposedly in these dachas in Foros Sanatorium in occupied Crimea. High-level Russian fascists, says Igor Sushko, were holding meetings at the facility, according to the locals. Many dead and injured in the precision strike. So it could have been some intelligence indicating that Russian senior officials were meeting in these dachas, and they were taken out, or possibly taken out, by a precision strike. Cyber Boroshno says the photo published on the internet with statements about the damage to Foros Sanatorium or Teplitsky boarding house was actually taken in Sanatornia area of the Foros Yacht House in Crimea. So that's just a little bit more detail about where it was, and geolocated to a more correct position there. So that could have had some success. Erlend here from Turchny says, overnight, Ukraine apparently droned a VIP sanatorium complex in Crimea, and the Russians are crying a lot about the strike. They apparently hit at least 2 facilities, Foros and Pensionat im Teletskogo, south of Sevastopol in the Foros urban area. The Pensionat im Skogo is known to have hosted Putin during his illegal visits to Crimea. The building has interesting antennas installed on the roof and extensive security measures. So that is the place that was hit, apparently. And then local Telegram channels are very upset about this strike, as they claim, quote, people whom are authorized to write about the red lines, who were observing the work of the Russian air defense, were staying at the facility. In other words, high-ranking Russian military officials. Quote, guests of several hotels and resorts also witnessed a drone attack on the southern coast of Crimea, with guests writing about red lines in the sky over the sea during the repelling of the drone raid. According to updated data, at the moment, 3 people have died and 16 have been injured as a result of the drone attack on the area of the urban-type settlement in Foros. I express my most sincere and deepest condolences to the families and friends of the deceased. I wish a speedy recovery to all the injured, who will definitely receive the necessary assistance and support. So who knows who was hit there exactly. Now, Ukrainians are thwarting the aggressors' aggressive plans, according to the General Staff. Now, I've reported to you this pattern of precision strikes, often using, it seems, the F5-point drones. Is it FP1 drones that are carrying 105 kilogram payloads and have a sort of 200 kilometer range. So this near rear, the medium range drones are starting to really pick apart targets in occupied territories behind the contact line. I think the Ukrainians, like we've seen on Crimea with the Primary unit, are having success behind enemy lines, taking out really significant targets. And this has been a repeated pattern over the last couple of weeks. And I think it's gathering momentum. So here we have Max 25 referring to the General Staff, who say the enemy tried to organize a delivery of various types of ammunition to the 17th Tank Regiment of the 70th Motorized Rifle Division near Bogdanivka in Luhansk region and distribute over 19,000 drones of various types in Donetsk region. So trucks delivered tens of thousands of mines, grenades and cartridges and various types of tank regiments of various types to the tank regiment's field depot, thousands of rounds for tanks and artillery shells. In the second case, the cargo consisted of various drones and related equipment, batteries, modules and video transmitters. First, on August the 28th, so we're going back 25 days or so, 26 days, the soldiers from Dnipro Special Forces Divisions struck a drone distribution logistics point and destroyed huge stocks of drones. Huge stocks of drones apparently getting taken out. And then on the 18th, now only sort of 4 days ago, sorry, I got my maths wrong there. I thought it was the 24th. It's the 22nd. So yeah. Anyway, so 24 days ago. Now 4 days ago, on the 18th, Ukrainian forces and the SBU destroyed the regimental depot of ammunition in the Luhansk region. Enemy vehicles were also burned. And actually, that's just two instances of many. Kiev Independent reports that the Kiev strikes a Russian drone hub and ammunition depot in eastern Ukraine. That's the same kind of report, talking about massive stockpiles of drones being taken out. We saw this from 2 nights ago when I reported this yesterday morning. Now, I didn't play the sound for this because I get into trouble, but this is a huge, I think, bunch of secondary explosions going off at an ammo depot somewhere in occupied territory 2 nights ago. Now, there were claims of multiple drones hitting that site, as I reported yesterday morning. So, adding all of these things up, here we have Bogdanivka, Luhansk region, now caught on satellite, showing some destruction there. Satellite images confirm the destruction of the regimental depot of ammunition there. Trucks delivered tens of thousands of mines, grenades and cartridges, thousands of rounds for tanks and shells for artillery. And that seems to have taken one heck of a beating, according to satellite imagery. But it's not just those two incidents. It's just happening all the time. Here is a 3-minute video detailing up in the Kursk region how a Russian base is being frequently visited by people getting. So here the UA Reg team, in cooperation with the SOU strike units, discovered and struck warehouses with ammunition, material, resources and places of residence of the personnel of the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade in Kursk. They've been getting a bit of a beating, as the 155th have up in Kursk, and they've got, again, the detection of these bases, and then you hit them. We go forward to hitting them with those FP drones by all accounts, and just immense destruction. We got that base, I don't know if there's this one, 19 drones out of 20 hitting a base, causing huge destruction. Then we had another base, and then we've had all sorts of different troop accumulations, 8 FSB officers being hit in one strike, 17 officers being killed in another strike, not hit, killed, both times killed. And I'm just thinking that the Ukrainians are being able to have, just like in Crimea, have degraded air defenses to the point where they can strike more consistently using these medium-range drones at Russian really high-value targets. And this is this morning. So this has happened this morning, where you can see that something bigger than just, I don't know, Lancet-style drones are hitting Russian points. So this is a reported strike on a Russian military site causing significant damage, suggesting heavier weapons may have been used rather than just drones. There are repeated claims about Neptune missiles being used in Crimea. Then there are claims about FP drones and drone missiles and missiles. So Firepoint have this range of munitions, as well as their Peklo drone missiles. I think the Ukrainians have increased the range of what they're using in that up to 200-kilometer circle, and they are starting, I think, to give the Russians quite some headache at the moment. So there's some significant damage being done to several buildings there, hit by something. And the argument is that they are military placements. Now, the analyst talks about this. Ukraine blows up 3 major weapons dumps. 3 of the forward Donetsk bases, so we're now into Donetsk 3 bases there, including the key base at Selidove that supplies a cross front, detonated and cooked off after Ukrainian drone strikes. Some 500 tons of ammo have been destroyed. So there is, I think, this growing pattern of really significant strikes. The other thing we're seeing is a concerted effort to go after petrol stations, although there are claims that actually they were striking at military vehicles in the petrol stations. This is Kadivka in occupied Luhansk region. That's a petrol station that's going to be no more. Here's another, this looks like it might be the same one after it's burning. Another gas station went up in flames in occupied Kadivka, Luhansk, unless it's a second petrol station in that same place. Fuel keeps getting harder to find in Russia. So the idea from this claim is that it is a case of going after the fuel. Here, that's been geolocated. Fire at a gas station there, geolocated from the other video. But then we hear that a gas station is on fire this morning in Severodonetsk after a drone strike there. So it could be that they are going for petrol stations, because it does affect, obviously, the local economy, but it's going to affect the military ability to stop at those petrol stations and refuel. Now, we then hear this from a Russian source. Attention personnel, an order was received from the headquarters of the Joint Group of Forces. Fuel supplies have been reduced and a strict fuel conservation regime has been introduced. Daily refueling limits have been reduced. This is a necessary measure necessitated by Ukraine's attacks on our oil refineries, and also now they're hitting gas stations, fuel stations. Every litre of gasoline is now worth its weight in gold. Discipline and careful fuel management determine not only the operation of equipment, but also the completion of combat missions. This is definitely, I think, something that the Ukrainians are now focusing on at multiple levels, and the Russians are really struggling with regard to fuel, and of course that will hurt, as mentioned, their economy, but also their logistics, military logistics. Here the analyst again says, an extract from a Russian who blogs on economic issues, as we go into the other bits and pieces. Things, it seems, are not going so well. So a Russian economic blogger claims, sometimes there are times when there is nothing to write about. There are no bright, attractive, attention-demanding news, but lately I simply haven't had time to cover all the desired topics. I jot down about 3 times more topics than I actually publish. The news flows endlessly, and as you understand, it's all negative. Incomes are falling, expenses are rising, production is declining, enterprises are closing, stopping, going into losses, going bankrupt, citizens' welfare is decreasing, taxes are expected to rise, forecasts are worsening, the economy is either stagnating or in recession. Certain industries are collapsing more and more new ones are joining them. And these are all topics from federal media, statements from officials, of which there are dozens daily. In other words, like, this is coming from officials. Imagine what they're not saying, because the Russian officials aren't going to be ones for shouting about their complete losses and economic doom. So he finishes, as you know, I've been tracking the financial and economic news agenda daily for many years, and there hasn't been this much negativity for a long time. I would imagine, well, since maybe the early 1990s. Wow. Right. Anton Gerashenko adds to the economic picture by saying there's evidence that North Korea's alliance with Moscow brings little economic benefit, according to researcher Olena Huseynova from Hankook University of Foreign Studies in Seoul. South Korea. In a study for Friedrich Naumann Foundation reported by Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, Pyongyang, ahead of Putin's visit last summer. This is North Korea ahead of his visit last summer. I was not surprised when I read this, says Anton Gerashenko. Russia always lies and betrays its partners when it has the chance. There are reports that Russia is also helping North Korea develop its unmanned devices program, but I'm curious how the partnership is playing out. Also, friends, if you have any information on the general amount of different weapons in the North Korean army, I'd be grateful for it. So, North Korea provided, he summarizes, Russian forces with weapons, ammunition, and troops worth up to $9.8 billion. And I reported that yesterday, over a third of its annual economy, while direct Russian supplies to North Korea totaled only $1.2 billion, according to the study. South Korean intelligence notes growing tension between Kim Jong-un and Putin. Interesting. North Korea sent soldiers and large amounts of weaponry expecting food, arms support, strategic technology, or economic compensation. Russia has not sufficiently reciprocated. Kim reportedly complained to Putin, who responded with reproach. North Korea's contributed all of those things there that I told you about yesterday, from 15,000 troops down to rockets and ballistic missiles, howitzers, launchers, blah, blah, blah. Russia mainly provides food, oil, limited air defense systems, GPS jammers, and possibly aircraft with little other significant aid or foreign currency. Moscow must be keeping Pyongyang dependent. EU Security Committee head Maria Agnes Strack-Zimmerman adds that Putin uses North Korea as a puppet to project influence in the Indo-Pacific. South Korean lawmaker Park Sung-won says Kim is also frustrated by the lack of long-term partnership prospects, as Putin avoids discussing a future despite Kim's desire to continue the alliance. Of course, Russia's going to struggle to promise anything because they're going to be struggling for everything, and they are going to be dependent on China. So it could be that North Korea is going to be de facto dependent on China for all the things it's wanting from Russia. Hopefully that kind of discontent will metastasize and cause issues for Russia going forward. Now, Kiev Independent reports, well, Politico reports really, US is moving to ease Belavia sanctions. So, they've lifted sanctions on Belavia, the Belarusian national airliner, which people have been complaining will allow Russia to get parts for their air fleet, for their Western airliners, through exports into Belarus. So lifting the sanctions means that Belavia will take on these parts and then they'll get them under the radar to the Russian airliners. So this move to ease Belavia sanctions has raised fears of spare parts reaching Russia, according to Politico. So I've talked about this 2 days in a row now, or for the last week. But actually now Politico is discussing it. There is growing concern that the US-made aircraft components could be diverted to Russian airlines, which face acute shortages of spare parts and maintenance capacity under Western sanctions. Now, an intercepted telephone call by Ukraine's intelligence has revealed a Belgorod resident discussing the arrest of the Governor Gladkov's deputy for corruption. We hear a lot from Gladkov. For his deputy to be arrested? Interesting, that's a big scandal. Quote, he stole too much. They took him to Kursk, she says, also complaining about drones flying over the region and Moscow's lack of response. Quote, nothing's being done. Complaints there worth taking on board. Now, the SBU, the SPU, have detained FSB agents who were shipping Ukrainian SIM cards for Shahed strike drones to Russia. So FSB agents working within Ukraine shipping SIM cards so that the Russians could set up their drones to navigate using mobile phone masts. Counterintelligence detained them in Kyiv region. One of them turned out to be a former law enforcement officer. The presence of SIM cards improved the navigation of Russian drones. The EU agents first purchased SIM cards and then sent them to the EU. From there, the mobile cards were sent to the cities of Naberezhnaya, Chelny and Yelabuga in Tatarstan. Investigative actions are ongoing to bring other members of the Russian spy network in Europe to justice. So that has happened. Now, a bit of I've reported this before, but it continues to happen. So last week, Putin visited a factory, the Motovilikhinsky Zavodi, and met workers there. And of course, the workers were the same security officers who posed as fishermen he met in 2016, grieving widows in 2017, and soldiers in 2022. It's a travelling circus. Again, this has been reported many, many times before. So very observant OSINTers often have noticed that often this woman and others as well, but this one woman here is the one that's been pointed out, appear behind Putin whenever he's visiting somewhere as if she is a worker, but she's one of the assistants of Putin, and it's all just performative PR stuff. Here she is in a high-vis jacket. Here she is dressed as a grieving mother. Here she is dressed in a military uniform as if she's in the army. And then when Putin went to a factory last week or whenever, there she was as a worker dressed in overalls. So, yeah, don't be fooled. These are really performative events that take place now. Now, I've been going to town on the US embracing authoritarianism and really shedding off the freedom of speech, shedding freedom of speech. They are going to town on the First Amendment in the United States at the moment. And it's fascinating to see the Russians seeing this and congratulating the US on account of doing this. They're loving it. Meanwhile, in Russia, says Julia Davis from Russian media monitor, Vladimir Solovyov, who has a very prominent show there, and his guests rejoiced that under Trump, America is abandoning its fundamental principles, including freedom of speech. Once again, he predicted that Trump's America will join Russia in its fight against Europe. The Russians are rejoicing that the US is embracing authoritarianism. They're telling you themselves. So when you get people on the right saying, no, this is fine, it's not cancel culture, it's consequence culture, and no, the FCC isn't doing this, and no, that Russia's looking at it going, yeah, you guys are attacking freedom of speech. We can see it. We know what to look for because we've done it ourselves. You're following the Putin playbook. Welcome to the dark side. It's just us against Europe now. It's us against Europe. Welcome, Trump's America. You will join Russia to fight against Europe. That is what they're saying. Now, talking about propaganda and pretty despicable, I think brainwashing. Here we have Russian television. It just breaks my heart to see young kids being used like this. It really does. But this is Russian television showing all of these young kids dressed up in military uniform and being made to march around and then learning stuff in school. That is just a form of nationalist brainwashing. It's sad to see that, isn't it? In my humble opinion. Okay, so that's Russian TV, and that's where we're going to finish. Not on a positive note today. Sorry to say. We're going to finish with Russian propaganda to see if anything has come out. No, we just got more on the strikes inside Crimea. So there you go. That's enough from me. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate your support. Astra has learned that 3 facilities were attacked in the Samara region on September the 20th, so 2 nights ago. Facility belonging to the oil trunk pipeline operator Transneft Privolga, JSC, and Prosvet, the Novokubishevsk oil refinery, and a production site of oil production company TPP Ritek Samara Nafta. So there you go. These things happen on a routine basis. A pumping unit caught fire, a process pipeline caught fire, and a gas pipeline caught fire at these different places. So the Ukrainians are consistently taking out that kind of equipment. Now, talking about these 2 Russian air defense systems, Ukraine strikes Russian S-400 air defense system in western Russia. A launch and radar system, the Russian S-400 Triumph air defense system, were hit during a Ukrainian drone strike on Kaluga, the Special Operations Forces reported on September the 22nd. Now, did that happen last night, or was that reporting something that happened some time ago? Unconfirmed reports from Russian media suggest that Kherson collaborator Soldo, so he's the occupied leader in Kherson region, may have been killed in a strike on a so-called FSB Dacha in Crimea. Sources claim he was at the site during the attack and has not been in contact since Sunday, while the occupation admin is trying to locate him. Wow. And we're hearing, goodness me, all sorts of news. Poland will shoot down objects that violate its airspace, says Donald Tusk. He added that in ambiguous situations, one should be careful. When we face situations that are not entirely clear, such as a recent flight of Russian fighter jets over the Petro-Baltic platform, but without violation, one should really think twice about deciding on actions that could cause a very acute phase of the conflict. I don't know if he means just drones or planes, but he's talking about planes there. This is big. Okay, so lots to report there. If Saldo has died, that is big news in the strike on Forest Stature. And if Poland are going to shoot down stuff in Polish airspace, that's huge. Anyway, that's a positive to end on there. So who knew? Anyway, take care. Speak to you soon, Toodle Pits. And please remember to check out Car for Ukraine and the Autumn Harvest campaign that they are doing. ATP Geopolitics part of that. And we have raised one of our vehicles has now been completed. Thank you out of the 2 vehicles. You guys are amazing. Thank you personally to the following. Cheryl Whaley, of course, is totally legend as a mod. Thomas Carlson, Michael Lamming, hey Michael, Klaas Schukema, Chris P, Joseph Squires, amazing from George Koenigsecker. Thank you for that incredible generosity. Mark Westerheim, Jean LeBlanc, Art Haynes, and we're back to there. So thank you to all those new additions to the list. You are all legends. Take care. Speak to you soon.